Hey guys, just wanted to go through, since I'm on call today. I have maybe about 10 minutes to give you some content before I have to go ahead and see patients, but I just wanted to tell you what it is to be on call. And there's different types of calls that that's available to you. So sometimes when you think about my name is Christine first, and welcome to a new video. I'm so excited for you to be here today and join me on, this journey about talking about call and how to become a CRNA and what to expect. There's definitely a lot to think about when you think about becoming a CRNA. And then also a lot of people have been asking me, what's call? What does a call shift look like? And of course, it's an important question to ask because when you are a CRNA, depending on what facility you're working at, you will be required to do it. Depending on other areas, like for example, some surgery centers you don't have to, versus a hospital, more than likely you'll be on call. So the different types of calls. So for example, if you work in the OR, say you work an 8-hour shift, a 10-hour shift, 12-hour shift, or 10-hour shift, for example. And for example, once a week, you might be on call. What does that mean? So say for example, you're basically the last person to leave the hospital, as well as in the middle of the night, if for example, an emergency case was to be called in, you are required to get to the hospital. At most places, you have to be at the hospital within 30 minutes and get ready to start the case. So that's what you have to think about, being on call. Now, there's also another thing, being on call, meaning like you're on call, in-house call. So for example, for me, I'm doing OB. I'm upstairs either doing epidurals, C-sections, spinal anesthesia for C-sections, for example. Or I might be doing cases, for example, as well. I am in-house, meaning I'm gonna be sleeping here overnight. So I come in at 7 a.m. today, I don't leave until 7 a.m. the following day. What does that mean? For me, a lot of times at the hospital, when you're on call in-house, they provide you with a room. So you have a bed, you have a room, you have a bathroom, you may have some of your personal stuff there. They'll give you a computer so you can document. Sometimes, depending on the hospital, you may not have that luxury. We recently got installed computers into our room so we can document, see what's going on outside of the OR or the OB department. So definitely think about that if you want to do a 24-hour call. And or if you're doing the other way of call, so for example, you come in at 7 a.m. in the morning, and say for example at 3 o'clock all the cases are finished. So at 3 o'clock you go home. So you go home because nothing else is going on if you're doing that type of call. So you go home, and then say for example, at 9 o'clock at night they call you, they say, hey, there's an emergency appendectomy or an emergency tonsil bleed, for example, you need to come to the hospital. So basically make sure you have your phone on you, and you can be home with your family or sleeping, but you have to wake up and get to the hospital within 30 minutes. That's usually the protocol with most facilities. You come to the hospital, you change, you go to your room where everyone's getting set up. So it's not just you, it's the surgeons, you have the surgical tech, the circulator nurse, you may have extra auxiliary staff helping, and they're all preparing for the surgery, and you go about how you would when you're working in the hospital. Same routine. Get your drugs together, you check your machine, you should have all your emergency equipment available to you, you go ahead and see your patient, go through the pre-op evaluation with the patient, make sure there's no changes. A lot of times when there's an emergency surgery at night, a lot of times they haven't been MPO, meaning they possibly eaten, so you might have to do emergency rapid sequence induction, a special technique where you put the patient to sleep, because you're at risk for something called aspiration. Anything in your stomach going into the lungs causes pneumonia. So I know it's kind of talking a little bit of like more complex talk, but that's kind of like what you have to think about when you're coming into the hospital. If you were home, for example, while I'm here, so for example, something going on really. So I go upstairs, I go take a nap, or maybe I'm getting everything prepared for the next day, making sure our epidural cart is stocked, calling pharmacy to get more local, maybe getting cassettes ready for patients for epidurals. Maybe I'm seeing patients, but sometimes you have time to have, a rest. Close your eyes maybe for an hour and you get called. Ding, and they're like, hey, we need you to come down. There's a stat C-section. Or a ring, there's a stat appendectomy that the anesthesiologist is at hand with. Or you need to do the case. Or ring, and you're laying there and you got to wake up and you have to place an epidural, for example. Or if the nurses need help with something, I'm always available to help. So that's another thing to think about when you're on call. Now let's think about bonus. What about, are you being compensated financially? Well, I'll get into it in just a moment, but if you like the content that I'm supplying with you, with my videos on YouTube, and you want to be a part of the Thrive CRNA family, definitely subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss anything. And also press the like button if this content you think it's good. Okay? So you are being compensated. So for example, they may give you, to be on call, they may give you a certain amount of money, maybe $100, maybe $200. It all depends on the hospital and the facility, what they give you. They will compensate you. Because sometimes you can be on call, you leave at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, for example, and you don't get called in. You're home and you don't get called in. And so very much you got paid for just being on call. While sometimes you're called in once, twice, it can be multiple times. And then you're expected at some facilities to work the next day, or some facilities will give you the day off after being on call. It varies, but you are compensated. Now, when you do come to the hospital, for example, you're compensated and being paid for being here. So say, for example, you come at you come back at 5 p.m. If you're here till 8 p.m., you're being 5, 6, 7, 8. You're getting compensated for the time you're here. And when you leave, then you basically clock out and you go home again. So you are being compensated when you come in, and you get a call pay, which is nice because financially, you may have bills, you may have requirements, and you just it is taking away from your time. So that's a nice thing about being compensated. Well, for me, for example, I'm doing a 24-hour shift. That's my shift. So I don't leave the hospital. I stay here from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I am here. So it's a little bit different. So at times at my facility, a lot of times what we do as OB staff is that, say we have from Monday through Friday, we have a regular OR person who works an 8-hour shift or a 10-hour shift, and they work that shift. And then, for example, say they leave at 6 o'clock at night, and then there's nothing else going on in the hospital, so they go home. If something is to happen at the middle of the night, it's different at my hospital where the anesthesiologist is the first call. And then you, as a CRNA, you are the second call. A lot of the times when there is a case that's going to happen at night, we really don't call the OR CRNA who's on call. The anesthesiologist will either start the case, or I will start the case, or we'll do the case together, help each other out, be a team. Because at our hospital, the OR person comes to work the next morning. So we try to help each other out and be a team. So that's a little bit of variations depending on the hospital. Every hospital is different how they do things. So on call for my hospital might be different for the hospital you're at. So when you go for your interview, these are some important things you got to speak to the people you're gonna, interview with. What is my expectation? Am I off the next day? What are some things, do I get called in a lot? Do I get called in little? It all depends, because say you're at a trauma hospital, you're gonna be called in a lot more compared to a small community hospital. You don't be called in as much. That's a little bit variability depending on where you work. So if you want to learn more about how to become a CRNA, how to grow your CRNA